So hello and welcome to Modular Podcast, episode number I can't quite remember, but we're going to be talking about small systems, effectively. Setting up a two-row system, reasonable size starter case, not too specific, but 84 HP or 104 HP. We bent the rules for James Cigler with his shared system and his 1U bus. Effectively musical approaches to a small system, and kind of where we're all at. We could touch in a year and it'd be entirely different, but what we would want out of a kind of musical system. Let's quickly introduce everyone. We'll just go down the line in order. How's it going, Matthew?
Yeah, great, thanks. Good.
Lots of synth goodies behind you. Any short synth stories or anything to tell?
Not really. I'm just about to tear all this down. I'm moving house, so you know what it's like when you have to pull everything apart and
pain in the ass.
Man, I'm not looking forward to it. I've got to take everything apart and just like label everything. But yeah, the new space, I'll have more studio space. Not a great deal, but it'll just be in a more workable area, footprint wise, which I'm looking forward to.
It's getting everything out of that door in the back corner there, the little synth dungeon. Anytime I'm round, there's sort of a bit of a, oh yeah, I've got one of them, and just pulls out some vintage classic.
Yeah, where that that's the mystery room of kind of secrets I keep in there.
Will you have one of those in the new house?
Yeah. Oh, wait till you see this one.
That's funny because I always thought that was the door to get into that room.
No, that's the secrets. That's the back of there. Yeah. But the new one has got. I'm not going to say anything because I want to reveal it on one of the shows. There's a mysterious, weird room that's going to be behind me in the other.
Leather-coated walls and floor and everything.
Yeah, if anyone's the new property I'm moving into was made in 1750, but it's like creepy and old. It actually comes.
Whoa.
It's got its own ghost as well. But the ghost doesn't just live in the house. It actually wanders around the village and then goes back to my house. Podcast if he wants to talk about anything.
We'll have to get those ghost hunters on, and we'll be watching the back of your thing going, is that something in the background, like creeping out of your back door? Well, we'll keep going down the line. James, how's it going?
Good. Just trying to stay awake at a baby not quite 4 months ago. I'm in the baby's room right now. So trying to fit in some music whenever I can, but been quite busy.
Is that I know it's not really, but I just said, is that the baby's synth? You've got
yes. Thank you, Nathan Moody. The baby's been playing your
synth. So what's the story we have in Nathan's synth, if you don't mind us asking?
I was really curious about Just Friends. Like, I finally sort of looked at the manual, and I've been really interested in envelopes that don't retrigger for a long time, ever since I regretfully sold my Plan B Model 10s years ago. And I noticed it did that. I was interested in trying it out, and we were emailing back and forth, and he just said, why don't I just lend you my whole blue box? He's going through this whole Buchla transition, so he lent it to me, and I've been checking it out. I ended up buying a Just Friends, so now I have access to two of them temporarily. But it's been a very fun system to play with, and I can talk a little bit more about like that because it is 84 HP, and it is definitely geared towards a performance aspect.
I really like you've got the red box as well, hasn't you, at home, Nathan? If I remember right.
Well, and it's like it's until you see it in person, you don't realize just how like beautiful just the subtle things of changing the knobs and putting the like blue screws in, and it more or less being the kind. It's mostly mannequins, with the exception of clouds, and a couple of IntelliJ things and the XAOC 4-step sequencer. But I've always really loved cohesively designed visual things, but it's definitely like a wonderful thing to sit in front of and see and play.
You said that he's transitioning into kind of Buchla, but you can tell from an aesthetic point of view that's got this homogenized kind of.
Yeah, and I mean he definitely tried to set it up, you know, in an easel type of band. Obviously, you have the touch plate keyboard, you have 2 oscillators. Obviously, you have some more function generation. Obviously, has a filter, and you know, clouds obviously didn't exist on the easel. But if you want to use that as a reverb, there's the spring reverb. So the inspiration was similar to making like his own easel, and it definitely feels like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, have you ever used the music easel? What I don't like about the music easel keyboard is those ridges in between the keys.
Oh, in between, and this has that a little bit. And I don't know if it's just because I'm not a keyboard player, but I have a hard time with it just in general. Like I feel much more comfortable with pressure plates, and each one is spaced equally, and I can tune it to kind of whatever I want. But just having that physical interface to trigger notes, modulate things, and change pitches is nice just in general.
There's Nathan's red system, or at least one incarnation of it, just from his Facebook page there. You can see Nathan Moody if anyone wants to go find him. A mix of Verbos, Chaos Devices, Sputnik, some IntelliGel. It does look nice.
It's really nice. And the album he did with this, which is up on his Bandcamp, is fantastic. Like most of the time when I've been sort of messing around with this, I'm trying to figure out like how he did some of that awesome stuff in there. Yeah, it's a very fun system to play around with. Like originally it was just like I was curious about the Mangrove and Just Friends, and it's been a pleasure to play around with and to just sort of see into the mind of someone else's way of setting up a system.
Yeah, I love that sharing thing. There's been times where Matthew said, "Oh, do you want to borrow this for a bit?" And then I'll give him a module. Or there's always kind of a bit of a reverse swap thing with us. Go on, you wanted to check this module out? I'll leave it with you for a few weeks. And he goes, "Do you want to take a CS30 or was it a CS15? Sorry, just take that for a while." I love that. And someone else was asking about filters the other day, Chris Batty, if he's watching. I was just like, yeah, just take a box of filters. Just take these. Tell me which ones you like. I might sell some. That's me doing videos, being fortunate for that. But yeah, anyway, we'll keep going down the line. Greg, how's it going?
I'm good, Ben. Thanks.
Go on, sorry.
No, go on. What are you going to say?
I was going to say, I've been a little bit quiet on Instagram lately, but every little patch you put up still absolutely grabs my attention in terms of the amount you're getting out of your setup.
Well, it's quite apt that we're having this podcast now because I think that's one thing that I've been conscious of doing. Downside that I'm just using 6U, and I have been for a while now. Well, every now and again I'll change 1 or 2 modules out, but it hasn't changed that much in the last couple of months.
Neither's your sound though. In terms of the patches you're putting up, I haven't noticed a shrinking down of kind of, you're still getting pretty much full, kind of techno house type stuff out of it.
Massively downsized. Pretty much everything I've put out in the last couple of months has been 6U.
Wow, nice. Well, we'll get into that. And finally, Corey, Red Stripe Down.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, good. You've got the view of the city, the synth. You've got it all going on.
I do. It's a good view. It's an inspiring view to work behind,
Yeah.
I've moved out of my closet. I was literally in the closet when we did the first podcast last year, and said enough is enough. I need to get out and have at least some kind of natural light. And being right here watching the city go by, it's pretty cool to create a soundscape for everybody coming and going all the time.
Yeah, nice. You recently started working at a synth shop.
Yeah. So I am managing Nerd Audio in Chicago right now. Took that over recently from my good buddy Matt, who has moved on to Florida. And it's been really cool. It's been quite an adventure. It's been very interesting to see the other side of the synth world. And not just the musician, not just the guy buying the stuff, but now I'm the guy trying to sell you the stuff. And it's a whole different game, but I've learned a whole lot about modules, different companies that I maybe don't own any pieces from. It's given me an insight into how people create workflow. And this is actually a great topic for us because I get asked about putting together systems all the time. And the first thing new people into it want to do is they want to create a small system. Nobody wants to go in at 10 grand. We want to start small and get as much as we can out of it. So I thought this was a a fun challenge and an appropriate one for the timing with this job.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's get into it. So as I said earlier on, for anyone that's just tuned in late, this is about small systems, a musical approach to a kind of 2-row, not a basic system or a starter system by any means, but creating an instrument and something for musical output, not just us wanting to experiment with sounds or particular things. We won't get into what is and isn't music. That's an endless conversation. So we'll just work down everyone, and everyone chip in and out in the chat. Feel free to comment. I am watching the chat if anyone wants to ask specific questions. We'll go down in the same order. We'll start with you, Matthew. I'll pull up an image of your system. You said this for you is a kind of hypothetical dream system of the minute.
Yeah, well, to me, I mean, it's interesting what Corey said of like, no one wants to drop 10 grand on a system, etc. I actually did that, right? I was looking if I just sold a house. I had approximately that figure together, and I went out and bought, well, it's that behind you, I bought tons of stuff. Now, Ben knows this. I have the most fun I think this is the magic for me, the magic size system. I just think it is a perfect. I'm not saying it does everything, but it's nuanced and it's curated. You can kind of, within this 84 HP size, you can just kind of go, right, what do I want to be today? Do I want to be a chord machine? Do I want to be a random generator? Do I want to be a noise box? Do I want to be a drum machine? I think this gives you the perfect kind of mobility to be able to sort of stretch into any of those kind of genres. But with this one, I chose sampling. And
yeah, I'll move over to an image of, there we go.
Yeah, so for this one, yeah, theoretically, I wanted to make like a live sampling machine. Which has got plenty of modulation possibilities and sequencing within this. And then obviously has the ability to be able to have human touch elements within this. So yeah, I was thinking it from a live sampling improvisational machine was my basic kind of idea.
So with the two, I guess the first thing, I know very little about the sound computer. For anyone wanting to kind of hear it, VCO ADSR, very different in style to you, Matthew, kind of dark, more minimal techno, but some amazing textural work and kind of pre-preparing some elements that let him almost improvise more, I imagine, live.
He's
because
fantastic.
He's got the backdrop.
I'm sure we can put a link in the video to some of his stuff. He's played at the Leeds events that like Ben's put on, etc. But he's now, I think, got 3 of these machines.
Yeah.
He's got like 2 or 3 of the sequences. But having said that, he's exactly in this kind of frame of mind. He kind of has a system of 1 module in, 1 module out kind of approach. And he has one of the real ones as a sampler. He has another one as an effects machine. And when he, well, I mean, you know, obviously, Ben, don't you? When he plays live, he really gets the maximum out of these kind of modules. He really kind of puts them through the rinser, as it were.
Yeah,
but,
Phil, I would just chip in and say that the show that is now on YouTube, or will be tomorrow, on Performing Live, has VCO ADSR on, and we played at the Leeds event that we hold. He talked us through the rig, came on the show. He was saying one of the samplers needed, I think it took the CV after the gate, so when he's sending a sequence in, it's always like a note behind, but it's triggering in time. So he said, I need to put a trigger delay in and just literally offset the trigger by 5 milliseconds or something insignificant. But he says, I have to take something out. I've got my rig that I've played with all summer, and I need to find 4 HP. He has a 1 in, 1 out rule and will not go to a bigger system, just for logistics of carrying it around.
It's literally that. It's from what can I fit on the train, what can I get through to the venue, what's easy to carry to the hotel room. It's that kind of, and I like that aesthetic. It can't always be about the sound. It's like, it's got to be something as mundane of, can I get it on my back? You know, can I move it around? You know, because he was talking about a bigger system and he was like hurting his back and stuff, you know, so.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So yeah.
you've got the 301 in there. I'll go back to the image, and the morphogene. How do you see them kind of working side by side?
Yeah, so I wasn't particularly trying to build this is a 1, 2, or 3 voice, whatever system. You were kind of in parallel and in conjunction with each other. The morphogene, I have the phonogene, I don't actually have the morphogene yet. Obviously, this is just a much bigger version of it. I like the kind of the spontaneity and the kind of random elements that this embraces more of the morphogene. So this was, like I said, this was more, I was seeing this more of a playing live improvisational system. So as well as having these two in tandem, they could either just be on their own as well, you know, and moving between each of these, either just simply via mixing or via CV controllable mixing.
So are you seeing this as an entirely contained system? No external sequencing or effects or...
Yeah, I was trying to do it as a contained system, having the Pico DSP as the effects within there. Yeah, I was trying as much as to have it as literally turn up at a venue. This is a piece that I improvise with, either on my own or with other people.
Cool. I'm just looking through the system. Are you, with a U scale in there, are you taking all your sequencing from random, so either the Turing machine or the Pico Rand or the Nano Rand? Are they very much in control?
Yeah, now, again, it would be all on the moment. So say, for instance, if I wanted to do something that was particularly more improvised by me putting in particular flourishes to another performer, I was thinking maybe of having pressure points into the IntelliGel view scale, and then having that kind of quantized, and then maybe the sequencer, you know, like the Turing machine and the pulsers, that would be used as a modulation source as opposed to a sequencer. So yeah, it's got lots of flexibility between that, or you could just, you know, do the conventional route of going Turing machine to the IntelliGel and then out from that. But again, this is I saw it as being really kind of flexible that way.
Yeah, nice. I mean, how would you patch this up then? We've got some people have made a patch on Modular Grid with the Sketcher patch function, which is really useful. Obviously, you've got the Rosie to queue things up.
Yeah, I was wondering. This is something I don't have, and I've been toying with the idea of getting this for so long, and I don't know why I haven't done it. You know, I really like that simplicity of being, you know, just this A/B and being able to kind of like literally have a pair of headphones on, cue up another sound, and then bring that in. And certainly for the kind of music that I create, I mean, I know I've talked about it on other shows, but probably just over a year now, I did a gig in Toronto, and it was a 6-hour continuous piece of music I did with other musicians. But I did perform live for a continuous amount of 6 hours, and it was on this size of system. And I really wish I would have had something like, I mean, I did it in a little bit of a different way, but it kind of had the same result of the Rosie, where I could kind of cue up sound and then bring the next sound in. But I think this is a really neat solution, or, you know, like a long organic piece where you can just then, particularly with a sampler, you know, because you've got different samples that you can kind of scroll through and load up. You know, I really like that kind of one in, one out swapping sonically.
Yeah, how are you? One thing I mean, I kind of know the answer because we're quite close and I get to see you do this. I can drive over and we can both patch and play around. But in terms of clocking, obviously things like the Pico Random can divide an incoming clock. The ER301 can no doubt do every conceivable clock thing you can imagine. How are you kind of handling clocks and timing? Because you've quite a free approach to that. You're not so rigid necessarily.
I mean, you know, I'm a big fan of the Quadra. I mean, I don't have the expander in there. I mean, the Quadra is just my favorite. I would be using the mass for the main clocking within this. I mean, the other thing, I mean, did you say to me that like they're not actually going to make is the Nano Rand it's going to be out of production now?
Yeah, I don't think it's,
I think that's a real shame. I mean, I don't see. I mean, I love the chance, and obviously we've done the show on the chance. Like, I don't see nanorand and chance as being the same thing.
Yeah, I may have to snap one of those up. I've been putting that off, but if they're going away,
Yeah.
I love. I don't, and I'm not using the word better or worse here. I love the nanorand just because of what it does in that size. And technically, if I was in a live situation like this, I would rather have 2 nanorands than 1 chance in this situation. And again, I'm not saying it's better or worse. I think the chance is fantastic. But I see these as I could easily have a nanorand and a chance in a case. You know, I don't see it as a successor to it. I think they should run parallel.
Yeah, well, with the amount of, just get rid of this image for now, the amount of kind of attenuated random, I see it as little humanizers, kind of in time stepped random.
Yeah.
Even in, like, we've talked about this before, a really basic, I just want to make a mono synth. If you put a tiny bit of stepped random to PWM, then to the filter, then to the VCA, then to the decay on the envelope, you can absolutely beautifully humanize what's essentially a really basic mono synth baseline or whatever it is. And then obviously you can get more extreme with that as well. I like to approach it for those that say I don't like random, because inevitably someone says I don't like random, it's not for me, and they've heard sample and hold into the pitch of a VCO and just gone, oh, I am not into that at all.
Yeah. That's only one tiny facet of it. I mean,
and if you try and pluck a string exactly the same time and time again, you can't. It's impossible. If you try and hit a drum with the exact same velocity in the exact same position every single time, it's impossible. It's why sampler instruments have round robins, where a good sampler instrument of, say, a snare drum has all the velocity layers, but there's maybe 10 of every velocity layer. So it round robins these cycles to try and create this human feel. And I like doing that, but that inevitably means that I want nearly 1 random voltage for every single parameter. And then loads of attenuators as well, because I just want tiny little bits of it.
Right.
I mean, the Pico random is excellent too. I mean, that is not, well, it's only just not as feature packed as the nanorand. But I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but like up until that point, I can't think of anything that was that HP size that had that burst random gate.
I don't think so.
Or even that, like the sort of musical note random gate output. The only other module I can remember in Euro that had, you know, random but still quantized beat outputs was the Plan B Heisenberg generator, which was 14 HP if memory serves.
Well, that's it for me. When I saw this, I was just like, bang. I need this immediately, and it was. I've been waiting for that size and that kind of that functionality in a module.
Yeah,
and like I say, the only other one that's come across that's close, which is obviously right next to it, is the Pico random. And yeah, in this size for me, because I really like loads of like these different kind of subtle random modulation events. And again, I use them not particularly for pitch. It can be timing, it can be for opening and closing envelopes, you know, obviously changing LFO speeds and stuff. That's what I kind of like to do over a long space of time. It's not like, as Ben mentioned, you know, the classic kind of into pitch, you know,
right, yeah,
this kind of sci-fi sound, which is tainted heavily with random, you know, and I guess, you know, rightly so, you know, but it's way more than that. So hence that's why 2 of those in this system.
Well, as you said, you've kind of answered your own question with these small HP random modules. As you said, like knob size or HP size isn't as important to you as it would be to others, because you made a patch and you stepped away from it for 6 hours. So these small random modules are perfect for you. Being littered.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not that I'm completely stepping back. It might be, but it's certainly. I'm not completely stood over something and going kind of. I'm riding the patch, as it were. It will be like, over that particular period for that gig. I was obviously manipulating and bringing things in and out. But certainly, when you get that kind of feature in that kind of size, well, like I said, that's back to my kind of original point with this, is that it's a shame that the Qubit are discontinuing that and seeing Chance as being the better and bigger module, as it were, where this, for me, packs a lot into that size. It shouldn't be seen as a lesser module, in my opinion, anyway.
Totally. One thing I will bring up is your performance with your free module challenge. Again, at Modular Meets Leeds, if on my YouTube channel, the DivKid channel, if you put Matthew Shaw in or free module challenge, there's loads of content. But you built a patch in this size system and walked away. And everyone, it's a really casual end to the event. We just did it like a kind of pub jam night, come and play some blues rock tunes in a pub kind of vibe. Just said, bring a system, free module challenge. You can talk and present it. I broke down what I was doing and then let it play, and we talked about it. But I said, if you just want to put a system up, we'll ring it through the PA. It's the end of the day. Nice way to end the synth meet. Everyone kind of took a seat and sat around. It was all very casual, and you just walked off. Like you just set the patch up and just walked off to the back of the room. Kind of like, where's Matthew done?
I was at the back of the audience, right at the back, like with my arms full, just listening. Such a great PA there, amazing sound system. And obviously, I talked about the patch prior to it, but I just wanted to kind of hear what the audience were listening to. Yeah,
now I bring it up, not just to kind of boost your ego, but with the pressure points in this one and no brains to sequence it, are you imagining you touch this and be a bit more hands-on?
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's not so much that, like obviously in this particular situation, you can imagine pressure points just literally opening and closing filters, or actually just using that amount to kind of modulate some other parameter. It's not, again, something that's going to be stood over and really kind of played per se. It may just be literally on-off facility or an attenuation of something. But I do find them endlessly useful. I mean, I have two in the brains, obviously, but normally when I have a kind of mobile patch like this, I normally do like to have pressure points in there somehow.
Yeah, to sort of control the machine orchestra that is playing itself, kind of thing. Yeah,
you don't always have to be as a sequencer. You can just be literally a mundane thing, but from a live perspective, it's just, you can't beat just going over to one really visible parameter and going on, off,
right,
up, down. It's as simple as that. I could literally, I was thinking, there's so many permutations of this I was thinking about swapping that out and having a joystick feature in there or something, but just something that will allow me to literally go on, off, or up, down is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, one of my favorite patches with the pressure points, I think I put just a really basic jam video up, which I try not to talking, because I imagine people think I like the sound of my own voice with the amount of talking in videos. But I think I had the dry wet of the herb verb on one row, the rotation of a clock divider on another, and I think it was a CV switch with different waveforms in from an oscillator, then feeding a filter. And just to sort of go, almost treat it like, it wasn't very song structured, but like intro, verse, chorus, middle eight, chorus, and be able to just go, you play for a bit and let it do its thing. And then be able to change everything. He said in a really mundane, just on, off, and just a few things change as you want. He's really good. Do you tend to use pressure at all, or do you not kind of get into that playing of the surface?
Not so much. I have done a little bit, but to be quite fair, if I had to come down on one side, I'd say no. It is perfectly. I've either used it as some kind of random system thing with your brains, or I have just literally open and close things with it. But that's a great thing, as well as obviously this is obviously modular, but that module in itself is kind of modular. It's like you can make it do whatever you want, and that's what's absolutely fantastic. It's
a wonderful tool.
Yeah, totally.
It really is.
It's just so. I mean, obviously, behind it, I've got the TKB Surge, which is where the genesis of that came from. And that's exactly the same. I just love being able to, of course it can be a sequencer, of course it can be a pressure device. I can have it where I'm sequencing opening and closing filter sections. It's just great. I just love it for that.
So you've got one filter in there, which is the variable Q. In a system that size, where you're really wanting to cram everything in, I guess why such a big filter? Is it a hands-on thing, or?
Well, I really like passing all sound sources through the same filter. That's something that I just personally like doing. I like
almost like a DJ mixer where I've got a high pass and a low pass over everything.
Effectively that, where you just suddenly make it absolutely everything in your content of your sound all dark, or you're opening, making it wider. And to me, I mean, again, there is there's more filters than anything else in Euro, but hands down, this is my favorite filter in Euro, even though it's from Surge. It's my favorite filter. It's just so versatile and just such a great sound. It can be equally the most harsh thing you've ever heard, to the most subtle thing you've ever heard, to the deepest thing you've ever heard, to the brightest thing you've ever heard. And then the fact with that switch, with the high-low, you can even process CV through it. It's like, are you kidding me? It's fantastic. It's so good. It's like, I just deny anyone to not like the character of this filter.
Yeah. So I like that this sounds so good, it has to go in.
Yeah, it was purely that. Like, there's a ton of other great filters that I have that have all got kind of like, oh yeah, that does that really well, that does that really well, that does that really well. Well, this one just does all of those things, all as well as those, and more. They're in a contest, basically. And again, like I said, I do not like using this word better, because it's
all subjective.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, it's just like, if you were ever to go and buy one filter, go and get that.
So one final question before we kind of keep moving down the line. Knowing that you like long form, evolving pieces, you're not after riffs and drums and quick kind of hooks or anything. That's not musically your style. With it being kind of so long form and you wanting to play this thing over the output, would this be CV? Are you wanting to kind of randomly adjust the whole output, or are you going over and thinking in this room, at this venue, on this gig or on this recording, you want to just take a bit of top end off? Or
I'd certainly, for me, it would be, I'd want the option of being able to have this thing of, I'd want the majority to be over CV control, where things were being brought in and samples were being brought in and out randomly, tonal changes were brought in and out randomly. But then, literally, I would want the ability to be able to, if I was playing with other people, to go, all right, this is going in a darker direction, I can just take all this out, or I can bring this in. So yeah, you've got, hence with the pressure points and where the filter is positioned, I'd want to be able to ride the situation, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Nicholas Ross asked in the chat, it sounds like the new IntelliGel module, talking about tetrapad, would be perfect for you. Any thought on that, Matthew, while we're on the market?
Well, when we were at Superbooth in Berlin earlier this year, I was definitely kind of like peering over Daniel's shoulder at it, and it really did look really good.
Looks great.
It's been definitely the next thing I thought, yeah, that there's only been pressure points around, which again, obviously is modeled on, the TKB over here. That's definitely brings something new to it.
Yeah, the development of this, for anyone watching IntelliGel's Facebook with updates, I'm sure it's on Twitter and things as well, but anyone watching their live updates of this thing, it seems
it's not out yet then, or is it out?
I'm not sure.
I don't believe it's out yet.
Right.
I don't believe it's been released. I could be wrong.
Like I say, we got a chance to play on it. We were messing around with it, and it was great.
Yeah, really cool. Well, we'll keep going down the line with everyone. If anyone's any questions for Matthew in the chat, put them in. I'll try my best to come to it. James, check out your system. You did a really interesting thing for us where we'd originally kind of said, let's do 6U, 84 HP. But, you know, you've got releases with a shared system that's slightly bigger, 104 HP. It's got the make noise bus, the 1U bus in the middle. So we kind of bent the rules.
Thank you.
In terms of examples for James's material, I'll say go to Jim Drove, name by the way, on Bandcamp, where you can check out these releases. I haven't had a chance to check the latest one out. Really enjoyed Dronestown and White Nights, though.
Oh, thank you.
I'd love to come out and see you guys performing with this stuff. We've a great scene around Leeds and the north of the UK, but especially like the modular on the spot stuff. I'd love to come check this stuff out. So I guess what's in the system? Why has it made the cut? What did it used to be? I'll pull an image up for people.
It's definitely evolved over the years, and in fact, even across those 3 albums, some things came out and some things went in. There's several tracks that, if anyone has an herb verb, you know, you'll hear that there's definitely like a lot of herb verb influence in some of those tracks. Sometimes that would come out and I'd be using external delay and reverb, which is usually what I do when I'm performing, just to have a little more either control or oscillators in the case. But in general, the core that I've had for several years now in my performance system is a DPO, at least one Optomix, the Rene, the Tempi, since it was in beta, has been sort of an integral part of my performance system. At least one pressure points. Just recently I dabbled with replacing the pressure points as with the voltage block, just to try having more CV outs and more stages to select between, and also be able to animate it with, you know, without a brains. The woggle bug is usually a staple, whether it's just to generate smooth random, or I love that there's a button on there to basically like hold the random. If it's moving slowly, or like my ear catches something that sounds great and I don't want it to move, you can throw your finger on that button and hang on to it for a little bit. I find that's a really important control. And those were kind of like the staples. Oh, and maths, of course. It handles so many duties. I mean, I'm guilty of just making it just be 2 envelopes the majority of the time, but the fact that it can do all those other things if you want it to is fantastic, whether it's a voltage controlled clock or a divider, or you know, using the channel 1 to just be a gate length modulator to take a trigger and now be able to CV the length of a gate, things like that. For the AHD, oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, James, I was just going to interject. Sorry, Ben, do you remember when we were in at Super Boot this year and we were talking to Tony from Make Noise, and we were talking about having T-shirts made of like when it's okay to use maths for?
Yes.
It's crazy because like, you get so many people like saying to him like, "Oh, well, I was going to use it for a slew, but then I thought, oh, I won't use maths for a slew because I want to use it for something else." And he was talking about, look, it's a really, really good slew.
Yeah, oh, it's fantastic. Like, and it's something you forget about, like slewing the rise different than fall, or vice versa. Like, and until you like start to really force yourself to think about it that way, you don't realize what kind of cool sounds are in there. Because most synthesizers are just, it's the same, whether your note or whatever is going up or down. But once you start to play around with like, oh, it goes up faster than it goes down, or vice versa, it's really interesting.
You should do like a video and just post it for every day. Like, Tony says Tuesday is okay for clock division.
Yes, yeah. Ways to waste maths. That
was the exact conversation.
I don't want to waste a channel, but I feel the same way sometimes too. It's like I don't want to
just get 2 of them.
I know, right? And I used to have 2. I should have kept the other one.
That was the conversation.
I just had to jump in with that just because it's like it really made me laugh when we were chatting. Do you remember? It was.
I think you were laughing that much you turned the camera off. It'd be gold that each year at the last 2 Super Bowls, we've gone out with Tony from Make Noise and found it's almost like we're on a date, like it's the third date next year. I did have someone comment saying, "Is Tony going to put out next year?"
We're a bit odd. We always get him to go outside. We think.
Well, the first one, we went off by the River Spree in the background. The sun's glazing on the wall.
Oh yeah, that was a great video.
It's gorgeous. And then this one, we were out in the woods somewhere because Super Booth had moved. Again, great setting.
Yeah, hey Tony, do you want to go out in the woods with us?
But great conversation just talking with Tony. As soon as the camera's off, we got onto this. And this is what I was saying. They spent so much time making it a good slew generator, and the amount of people that say, yeah, but I don't want to waste maths for that.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm guilty of it too. Like it happens all the time. Sometimes I have to force myself to go, you're only going to get one envelope here. You have to use this as a clock divider, or the gate voltage control gate width modulation, or just as the clock source. I mean, one of my favorite things about Tempe is I don't feel locked into having to clock to anything. Yeah. Like if I want to have the loop of a morphogene be the master clock, I patch that end of splice out into the Tempe. That's my master clock. If I want this cycling mass thing that I started a patch with that sounds great and I want to clock to that, boom, into the Tempe, and now I can create divisions or multiples from that. Or even like most of the time it's the woggle bug is the clock out into the Tempe, and I have at least a manual control over the clock. So and I'm always just rhythmically tapping in the divisions unless it's like something so fast I can't tap it, or so slow I can't tap it. So that's another reason it's become integral for me performance-wise. I'll just mute a channel, and then once it's muted, tap in a new rate, unmute it, pull it back in. And I haven't really come across something that I can like on the fly improvise switch the tempo like that. So that was a huge one for me, is being able to tap in those rates. And then I think in the 84 HP version of my 104 system, I put the morphogene just because not only is it a really flexible thing in general, like if you're just in a studio setting or whatever, you can have pre-recorded samples into that you find interesting to manipulate. You can grab loops on the fly. But performance-wise, it's become a great one for me too, because I can grab stuff on the fly and manipulate it. I usually have the whole patch is going into the input, and I use that sound-on-sound crossfader to cross between what I'm playing to something manipulated in the phonogene while I maybe cue up something different. Or, similar to the way that like Matthew was talking about using Rosie to kind of crossfade to something else, bring something back in. I'll do that with the morphogene, and I did that a little bit with the phonogene too back in the day. But obviously, the shorter recording time limited like how much you could grab, and then also how much you could manipulate without hitting the really crunchy sound of slowing the sampling rate down a bunch. So that one I think is just such a wide, useful palette. I put that one in there. Even though it hasn't been a staple for me as long as like maths and DPO and the Optimix. And then the Integra Funkitus from Noise Engineering has been a very recent great tool for me live. And I use it kind of very pedestrian-wise. I almost always just use it in that trigger mode. And it's either like muting one of the clocks from Tempe or the master clock, or adding a little bit of sort of slow advancement. So like I might have the master clock going to Tempe and also into the Integra Funkitus, and one channel may say go to the voltage block, and I may have channel 1 all the way down, and when I want the voltage block to move a little bit, maybe I'll turn it up so probabilistically it's advancing a little bit. Or if I want it to just, all right, now we need lots of motion, turn the knob all the way up, and now we get the full clock rate. I actually have it mounted upside down so that the knobs are closer to my hands and the cables are closer to where the cables come out of Tempe and stuff. So I've gotten used to the knobs going that way rather than that way. But that's actually been surprisingly useful from a performance standpoint. So that's why I threw that in the 84 HP system. And then,
Richard Devine in a really early show for us, I think it was the second interview kind of thing we did, talked about building up patches to their peak and using probability to strip things back down.
Yes, that's one thing I've noticed a lot with a lot of my patches is I'll find what the peak of the piece is going to be, It might be like all the oscillators are open, and I'm moving the sequencer at 16th notes or something, and I know I'm going to build to that and then build back down from that. That's probably the most general way I may form a piece, or maybe it's a slow build all the way up and then kind of end more abruptly. But yeah, and having the ability to have the tempo, the pitch, and the modulation all potentially moving separately in a different clock rates is a really big thing for me, especially improvising these performances. I was saying earlier before we started going live where I had built this performance where almost everything was controlled from the voltage block, and there would have been 3 to 5 minutes that were just amazing with all this complicated modulation and lots of things changing. But the rest of the performance was kind of hindered because I couldn't separate the rhythmic, the pitch, and the timbral modulation elements from each other because I had programmed them all in the voltage block. And then, and I don't know how I forgot Renee. Renee has been such a staple for me from the very beginning, not only because it's a sequencer where I can dynamically change the notes that are going to be playing through touch and locking the touch or changing the XY clocks, but also that you could just mute the clock and I can play it by hand, which I probably do 85% of the time. Every performance, there's at least some point where I'm playing the Renee by hand. So I don't even know how I could modular, without a Renee.
I'm right there with you, buddy.
Yeah,
I learned that from you, watching your
nice.
videos. It's really one of the best playable tools.
Yes.
In the format. I mean, Jesus, the amount of expression and variation you can get out of it and improvise right on the fly. I mean, it has to be in the case for me too.
Yeah, there's been like a couple times where I've taken it out of the case to, put like even just 2 pressure points or 3 pressure points in, and there's something about it that I miss, and I think it's just being able to jump easily between clocked sequencer, manually played sequencer, clocked and only playing certain notes. It's just very flexible for how I like to perform. And the albums I did, all of those were just performed live. So I would sort of work on a patch, find out how I would sort of perform this patch, turn the recorder on, and then just perform it and kind of improvise it, and try and tap into emotionally what I wanted to make. Every once in a while, you'd screw up something bad and you stop and you start over from scratch. And every once in a while you have some bad screw ups and you just go, well, the rest of the performance is great. So I don't think I could do it better even with those mistakes. And you just stick to it. And that's actually great because, I don't know, for me in my brain, the more I can think about it and the more chances and opportunities I have to change stuff, the more I second guess it, the more I think it sucks and I'll never finish it. So, I can just go endlessly into like, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. But if it's just captured and it's done, it's done.
I just pulled the chat window up. For those that are watching this on YouTube afterwards, go follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or me kind of anywhere. We post when we're going to go live with this stuff, and the live recording is separate to the YouTube video. But Mark, ZNO, Mark, tell me how I should say that properly and not sound so stupid. Raises a couple of interesting points and brings up Sputnik. We've been talking for a while. Mark's building up a real kind of West Coast system, a lot of Sputnik stuff. I imagine very much along the lines of Nathan's approach, as you started, James, telling us about Nathan Moody's system. Mm-hmm. There's also us in the chat, but mentioning things like Mark was saying as well that he builds the peak and works backwards as well. And that being a useful tool. Obviously not live. It's not like bit by bit you take it up and up and up, and that's kind of the boring bit, and then you start afterwards. But also these ideas of sort of quad, like the Sputnik modules, 4 of something or 2 of something, each module being a block of multiple things. Here's a bunch of random, here's a bunch of oscillators or 2 oscillators or 2 low pass gates. Is that kind of how you set your system out, James?
A little bit. I mean, there's something I really like where I have to be forced into a choice. So for example, like say maths, channel 4 has an end of cycle, channel 1 has an end of rise. You may not be able to use the attenuator out of 1 and 4 if you're using the mixer for something else. So there's these things where it maybe forces you into a choice to where, all right, well, if I need to use the end of rise out to do voltage controlled gate width, I have to use channel 4 in this other specific way, or I can't be using the channel 1 out because that envelope is now going to be influencing the mix. Or like even the DPO, like, okay, if I really need a saw wave, that means I have to use VCO-A, and that may influence the way I use VCO-B or some of the rest of the patch. And I like that because a lot of times if every choice is presented to me and I could just do it any way I wanted, I find myself just resting on what I'm comfortable with, and things will start to sound the same. And before I got this 6U system, I had a big monster case. I had a massive system, monster case, 2 skiffs, everything, and I just kept patching things in a very similar way. And I decided I want to do more performances too, but I want to get a portable system. Let's pare this down to my favorite stuff. And over time, I found things that, I worked the best with, and it's been great. I now feel like 6U is like the perfect size. And for partly those reasons, like you have to make choices and work with those limitations. And I personally find that those limitations push me to make more creative decisions and get more interesting results that I wouldn't have gotten if I'm just, imagining stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a lot of, looking at your system, I guess sort of envelopes and like VCAs, low pass gates. I mean, there's 4. There's the new Make Noise module and an Optimix. Is there a lot of manual playing?
Yes. Yes, lots. And in fact, one of the things I was really interested to see with Just Friends is, can I kind of alleviate some of the manual stuff and get more motion so that, my just 2 hands can focus on the most important part and I can still have that motion going, because a lot of it, whether it's controlling the amplitude levels of the oscillators or the mix level of morphogene or any of these things, I tend to be doing manually. And like Renee generally controls the pitch of all the oscillators together, and I'll just tune them to intervals. So there may be only certain parts of the piece where you hear all 3 or 4 voices together. And I kind of get these sort of melodic or harmony shifts by just turning one oscillator up and the other one down, or changing what the gates are.
Yes, Sunil asked in the comments actually how just a general question to everyone, although it was when Matthew was talking about transitions. How do you move from song 1 to song 2 effectively? It's great to play one patch, really rinse it, build the sound up, bring it back down, change the effects. But is that kind of what you're doing? Is each oscillator a kind of subsection of a piece, and you want to play it?
Yeah, they're. I kind of treat them like voices, and you may be hearing 2 voices together, so they're harmonizing to create some more, either tension or harmony, I guess. And I do try and play around with. There's at least, I think I put it in an 84 HP system too, but a manual toggle switch where I may have the 1 volt per octave signal to 1 oscillator going through this switch, so I can kill it. And then that 1 oscillator can drone. I do that a lot with the DPO, where I have follow turned up on A, and A is following along, and then at some point turn follow all the way down, and now A is just sort of droning and never moving, and that can be something to play B on top of, and find these ways to while I have 1 volt per 1 single pitch source, Renee, create harmonies and layers with these different voices. Just Friends kind of popped the Telharmonic out just sort of because they're the same HP. But one trick I use all the time with the Telharmonic is that D gate in, where if you patch a cable there, the degree changes will have no effect until the patch is sending a high voltage signal. So I may do things where I have an offset set to one of those manual toggle switches, or I may just use channel 2 or 3 from mass to generate that offset, so that I could turn that offset off, and now I've locked the Telharmonic to the root note or some sort of note that I want to drone, and I'm going to play the other oscillators on top of it. So that kind of flexibility helps me a lot performance-wise. Again, because I'm improvising it, and I'm sort of going off feeling, and if I have multiple sequencers controlling the pitch of multiple oscillators, it gets hard for me to improvise from that. You know, I'm locked into what I may have pre-programmed.
Yeah. Just before we keep moving down for time, I'd love to speak to each of you at length about this, and I'm sure we will, and maybe revisit this in 6 months and see how much it's changed. Guy VRKO just said, can we tell him a bit more about the morphogene? You touched on using that to effectively buy yourself time, you know, using the dry wet blend to move from even recording bits of the live set, I imagine, processing that while you queue up something else.
Yep.
So is that the final output in the system? That's everything kind of goes through the morphogene?
Generally, yeah. I've been playing around more with using an external mixer and patching out, like, you know, the Optimix sum out goes to one channel, or individual Optimix channels go out, and the you know, morphogene to a separate out. But generally, the whole patch goes into the morphogene, so I can use that sound on sound to blend between whatever's in the morphogene and whatever's coming in live. Sometimes I'll use it to layer things, like maybe I'll play a melody and try and grab that. It's not always easy to grab a nice perfect loop, but something, and then I can blend and play on top of that. It's another way to kind of do the similar trick of like locking, say, the telharmonic at a pitch. If I just sample in what I played, and now I can play on top of that like a looper pedal. I'll often have a couple like interesting stuff. Like I find some of the most interesting sounding things are not modular sounds recorded in the morphogene, whether it's piano or just human speech or things that are very dynamic, particularly in the like timbral stuff. That sounds really cool smeared out. So I may use that as transition points. Or if I know I'm really working on a piece that's got a lot of harmony or melody in it, I may like record stuff that's like in the same key. Like I might, you know, record a bunch of stuff that's in D in the morphogene, and then I know I've got the quantizer set to notes in D, and they'll be in sync. But at the same time, I'm also using stuff where if I'm improvising and I'm kind of running dry or something on what I'm going to do, can get some stuff into the morphogene and then just mess with it for a little while. And I tend to use it a lot by hand. I might have a random gate go into the gene size and use the attenuator to adjust how much it goes from, you know, no gene to tinier gene, and you get this kind of like random stuttery thing, or a random voltage to the slide position. Mostly I'm just playing it by hand.
Yeah, cool. I've just got well, you can't see it, it's too far away. There-ish, next to the Rennie. I've just got a Rennie in a trade as well, so I need to go back and watch
Nice.
James on that.
You're gonna love it.
Yeah, I think so. The morphogene's proving really cool. The reels that are available on, they've put them on Freesound, are really cool as well. I've taken those as a starting point. Playing around with Alex Myler Melody's outtakes from the old family piano at the sort of.
That was a fantastic one. Just that like super characteristic piano with the ambience in there. There's so many awesome things that, you know, once you start looping these tiny segments and you have the morph up where it's layering genes and doing random pitch shifts, you can get some really amazing stuff.
Oh, it's great. Me and him were at Deershed Festival, which is a kind of family-friendly festival in the north of England. And they have a science tent. And there's universities there doing kind of really cool experiments with children and, you know, pedal-powered stuff. So the kids are kind of pedaling away like mad, and the whole tent's doing something. We were there with some modular, which was amazing, to kind of present it to families that were just like,
cool.
What's this crazy box of buttons and knobs and wires? And there was very few people kind of knew what it was, and that was a really cool atmosphere. And he just said to me, he'd come up from London for this festival and said, have you got an audio recorder I can borrow? I said, yeah, there's a Zoom Pitch 4 I can bring. Why? What are you doing? He said, I'm recording the morphogene video. And I said, with what? And he said, well, I've just got this. And it just, some really crappy, cheap dynamic mic. It turned out beautifully. He just put the H4 on. I don't know if he used the onboard mics. It sounds like he's just kind of dangled the dynamic mic in this upright piano. But it's gorgeous. There's noise in there. There's some life and dynamics. And the morphogene is just perfect.
You don't have to fidelity in inverted commas. You want kind of, you want the closeness of the wood of the upright piano. You want the room it's in, because when that's all pitched down within morphogene, you get all those amazing artifacts that you don't actually hear.
That's what it's perfect for. As I've been playing with it, I've realised that it will do for its 32-bit floating point. It does high bit depth audio, but to get near that noise floor in that recording from Alex and others I've been playing with is great, and it works so well when it's pitched down. Well, we'll keep going down the line, just conscious of time. Greg, let's pull up your system. Again, a 6U system. You talked about this is your system now. You've cut the whole thing down.
Well, I haven't cut it down for good. I still have all my other modular. I haven't gone and sold it off. I haven't gone crazy. Yeah. But what I've done recently, James kind of touched on it there a little bit. One of the reasons why I got into software synths and modular in the first place is because with software, there was too many options. Yeah. So I'm starting to find that with my bigger system. I mean, you've seen my bigger system now. I'm 30U plus. I know it's not as big as some of you guys' systems, but it's. And I kind of found myself reaching for things and over patching a little bit. Whereas with this, wearing it down, I'm starting to get good stuff out of it again, just with fewer options. And as James said, you're forced to do certain things. Yeah. Well, let's check the patch out. I was listening to the audio again. We'll cut in and there'll be links. The separate bits of audio that we've done with these systems will go up separately as well. They'll all be linked in the description on YouTube when the video's up. I found myself looking at it and going, where are the drums coming from? Because I was hearing a full, it's effectively a full kind of tech house piece. Synth lines, drums, I imagine some manual manipulation over it. It's the makings of a kind of mini dance track, very club focused sort of track. What is the drums? Is it the Pico drums and the waves? So they're all samples. Then you've got a little bit of noise from the rainbow noise into the pastel one. What's it called again? Skis. Yeah. So with the samples, what's made you go samples over drum modules? Just space, or is it a just space thing? Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of the mutant drums, but within 6 you're not going to fit many of those into it. My original one that I was going to do when we mentioned that we were going to do this was going to be, because I do have an 84 HP 6U case that is just drums, and that's separate to this. I could have used that, but this is a patch that I already had patched when we said we were going to do this. You mentioned 84 or 104 by 2 rows. I was like, well, I've got a patch ready to go. And it was only since then I realized I'm using every module in here. I think apart from one. I think apart from the O2, which I used just to tune oscillators in this other module here. So where's your sequencing coming from? It's a BeatStep Pro, which kind of cheats a little bit. But one of the reasons as well, with this case, this is a 6U Le Mans case that I use. And with the lid closed, my BeatStep Pro will fit inside it, and a few cables and the PSU as well. Yeah, perfect. Anything else external? There's the dope furs at the A138D, the pedal interface. Yeah, there's a couple of Strymon pedals. There's the Dig and the Blue Sky. Beautiful. I mean, people, when you listen to the audio, they'll get it. It's a hell of a lot out of, especially if you can fit that beat step and the pedal in the case when you put the lid on. That's pretty much I've used into the case here, which kind of makes it, which I know it's cheating, but if you're talking about a portable system that you can carry around with you, I can fit everything that I've used here inside that case. Just bring it with me. No, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before, but there's a lot of people in the chat. Thanks for everyone that is watching and commenting away that hasn't, for the benefit of them that haven't heard us talk about it. You have an interesting way of working, I think, with a qubit chord. You're not such a fan of just a completely stacked chord sound. What are you doing with that? Well, kind of with the chord, it's like what we've talked about with other modules. I've kind of found with the chord, I can pick out a chord in a mix now. I think if somebody's patching with a chord, I'll immediately go, well, they're using a qubit chord. You have to switch it up.
It's like rings and elements and clouds to an extent. In certain modules where you're like, oh yeah, that's just rings into clouds. It's become a meme of itself. And a chord as well. You hear that stacked chord and you think no one's doing 4 voice chords that are so perfectly in tune and so gorgeously moving through diatonic harmony. Because there isn't really a sequencer that supports it. So it is blindingly obvious when it's just the mix out on a chord. You're splitting all the voices though, aren't you?
Yeah, it makes it really good for FM, which what I'm using it for here a little bit. For FM, the chord is really good because you can morph those waveforms and the voicing and the inversions and all the rest, and it's still harmonically related to the root note, which makes it really, really good for FM. You get these kind of, I don't know, it just sounds really nice for FM.
Yeah, that's a really great idea.
Yeah, I haven't thought about using mine for FM. I mean, I love mine, but I never thought about using it in that way. That's awesome.
No, me neither. Taking that out of being the audio source and just saying I want an FM source that will track perfectly and morph and invert and give me all 4 voices and be diatonic or not. Just follow that kind of classic house stacked chord if you want it to.
Well, it's almost like using 4 oscillators with 4 quantizers and loads of other CV going into all of these things for an FM source and switching between them all.
Yeah.
I don't know what other way you could get that without using a hell of a lot of modules.
Going back to that guy's comment about wanting to have 4 of everything, having 2 of everything, Qubit's done a really nice job with all their new releases where you've got 4 channels of everything, and it works so well as a complete system, but a really nice way to just incorporate a lot of utility in a relatively small amount of space in your system.
Yeah.
We're totally on it with that.
Yeah, really good. We started a kind of sub-series called Features where we get the designer on and we all have whatever that module is and just discuss it and all make patches. And Andrew came on to discuss Contour and then back on to discuss Chance. They're really on it with that over at Qubit. Someone's asking what your Instagram is, Greg, and I can't find it. What's your Instagram account?
Plegosaurus.
Plegosaurus_Rex.
There we go. I couldn't, whatever reason, I couldn't find it. So, what's the kind of Piston Honda doing playing off the chord? How are you kind of, because are they sharing pitch information or are they 2 separate sequences?
No, they're tuned. I think there's an octave apart in the chord. I've got it tuned and it's FM into the Piston Honda. So I've got I've also got the 5th coming out into the external in, and that's coming out. That's what's coming out into the Wasp. But so I've got internal and external signals coming out of it. Plus I've got the root note FM in the Piston Honda, just a tiny touch. It's not a lot of FM going into it, but you can kind of hear it as you can hear that little bit of movement in it.
Yeah.
So I've got the external going in as well, which is all the CV I've got going through the wavetables. So that's moving the chord as well as the root note FM in it.
Okay, that's cool. And do you find that the 5th, because it's a very kind of stable harmony of 5th in terms of, regardless of the instrument and the sound, is that always kind of tracks all right? It works fine. Sometimes 3rds and 7ths can kind of beat a little bit.
Yeah, they do. I tend to use root and 5th when I'm doing this kind of patch, and because exactly how you said, it's a lot more stable.
Yeah, cool. Is the Black Hole DSP just kind of over the whole thing, or? No,
it's over the drums. You'll hear a slight little delay on the kick drum. You can hear the kind of, as the kick drum comes in, you can hear a really short delay. And that's all that's really doing it. But it's over the whole drums. You can kind of hear it over the whole drum patch.
Yeah.
Very short delay.
Yeah. Mark Zeno, he told me how to say his name properly in the chat. Thanks, Mark. It'd be nice to have links to music with these systems in the final show. We will definitely put up links to all this stuff. We'll share them on our Facebook as well. Albums and Instagram and patches and all that stuff. I just wanted to ask you about your mixing before we move on, and if anyone's got any other questions. You've got 4 separate mixers as opposed to one kind of output performance mixer that we're seeing a few of now.
Yeah. I really like the CP3 mixers. I just like the saturation in them. If there was a kind of performance mixer that's saturated like those with CP3, I'd buy that in an instant. It's just
fine, Greg. That actually, I've thought about that for a while actually. Why someone hasn't combined that with the, with that saturation effect rather than being super clean DVE sort of mixer.
Yeah.
There's a few of them, isn't there? There's the STG.mix, which is what you had there, Greg. There's the Manhattan Analog CP3 that I think when they did them assembled were DTM, dual transistor mixer, I think they called it. Same thing. And the Ring SM from HHC.
That's got 5 channels, which is really...
No, I was saying they're all right as little individual modules.
Yeah.
I'm surprised someone hasn't brought a mixing environment, as it were.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying.
With something that has
like panning and queuing and ascend on it, and yeah. They seem to only be available in these little mini mixer packages, which they're great dotted around. It's my favourite little mixer. That cool.
Kind of asymmetric clipping is gonna.
What's really nice with it is if you put your envelope
Really
in and don't hit that peak where it clips, so you get the kind of true shape of your envelope, and then just use a slow LFO, and then once that LFO merges with a peak of an envelope, it just squashes the top, and it'll turn an ADSR into an AH DSR, because that'll tackle peak. The envelope's pushed it up, so it's going to flatten out, then decay, then sustain, then release. And to be able to do that with like stepped random, so some, in time with a sequence, some notes the envelope will cram up. The peak won't change because you've hit the top of that circuit and it just clips like it would for audio. It's really cool manipulating envelope shape that way. A bit of a kind of unsung trick, I think. They do sound great as well. And kind of last in the line before I babble away, Corey.
Yeah.
Red Stripe Down. First of all, benefit people in the chat and things. Where's best to find your music patches? Where would you send people?
If they want to check it out, I'd say Instagram is a great place to start. If you want to listen to full release, I've got stuff up on Bandcamp. And if you DM me on Instagram, I'll send you a free download code for the album. How about that?
Nice.
I'd rather people have it than make the measly $3 on it. So DM me, and I'll send you a code.
You're always good value.
A good value guest. Every time I try and search you, Red Stripe Lager comes up, even though I put Red Stripe down. And then Instagram then brings the hashtag up, which is inevitably loads of different people. Is it just / Red Stripe Down?
It should be. Yeah, Instagram.com/Red Stripe Down should be the go-to there.
I've got it. For some reason, Safari's not been my friend tonight. Yeah, there we go. It's certainly how we all got in touch, actually. Instagram's been an amazing place for... I think you were talking to Greg first.
Yeah.
Greg saying, check Corey's stuff out. This is great. There's lots of very good patches on there. And then Bandcamp as well, which we'll link to both. In fact, it's there, redstripedown.bandcamp.com.
That patch right up there, the first one on the top left, is the patch that I did for this. I am cheating a little bit. I'm using the Analog 4 for drums, and it's clocking everything, but the sequencing, all the notes, everything else is coming straight out of the 90 HP 6U system.
Oh, nice. Well, I won't hit play because we are going to edit in audio clips as we kind of changing down each person. The audio, it sounds quite processed to me. Like it sounds like it's compressed and mixed. Is that just a bit of a magic touch, or have you actually processed it?
No, nothing's processed. That's both instruments are recorded just directly into dry tracks in Ableton and then bounced. I didn't even touch volumes, EQ, nothing.
Oh, nice. Magic touch then. I'll pull up.
Sure.
How are you finding that new Instro oscillator? That's something I wanted to ask about.
Oh, man. I get a lot of questions about that one. It is beautiful, not only in design and aesthetic, but I've got it here behind me. It just sounds great. The wave shaper inside, or the wave folder, is fantastic. It's a really killer instrument, and I've really been enjoying everything he's been putting out. And I've got my eyes on a few other of his toys. It's a cool addition and a welcome one to the Euro community.
They're totally ones to watch at the moment. Anyone who hasn't come up with their stuff.
Really cool stuff, really cool ideas. I noticed that in your patch bin coming up, you've got the Harmonic in there, which is one I've got my eye on.
Yeah.
Loving polyphony. You got to have that, man.
I've got some kind of
Incredible.
I have some kind of gushy love message to Instro when we get to my patch.
Yeah.
They came, I've spoken to Jason a little bit. They came to Modular Meets Leeds, brought the whole team down, some of the guys that are collaborating on stuff, brought several cases. They had the potted plants for Scion to work with, which was way cooler than people. So I don't want to mess around with plants. It was a really cool thing, Scion, and it could manipulate your audio in a feedback path. It's basically a module that's looking for resistance in a circuit. But
it doesn't have to be plants, though, because it could be a ground wire, it could be anything.
You could hold the end of a patch cable. It could actually be audio, and it's just looking for changes in voltages and current. But it being attached to the plant and being able to manipulate it at a symphony was great, because everyone's like, wow, it's so tactile. And then we ended up having these conversations about how ethical it is to mess with plants, and we kind of went off down one. But basically, Jason came to Modular Meets Leeds, our event in August, and just absolutely killed it. I was so impressed. And all the modules he's putting out, I've got Troika, the triple oscillator, and the Harmonic.
Yeah, that's what sold me on it initially.
Yeah, so good. So what's the kind of approach with this? You said on Instagram you had the A4 doing some drum sounds. So you've taken drums out of this case. Is this kind of...
I have. I'm sorry. I did send you a modular grid. Maybe I just didn't get it to you in time.
Yeah, I'll put that up as well. I just like the actual picture.
Yeah. Well, I did fill out the extra 12U in that case to make it a full 90. I threw an IntelliGel U-fold in there, and Beast Chalkboard, which I noticed Greg had in his case. Which is one of those tools I don't understand why everybody doesn't have that in their case. Being able to switch octaves on the fly is a killer and very basic concept.
Yeah, and
you look at all the Moog oscillators, you've got that right up there on the front. Being able to jump octaves is huge. Just changing a sequence from low end as a bass line to something high end, or splitting it, because there's two channels here, is a great way to get some variation in your patch and take the same idea and make it new again.
Yeah, and like was to be able to accurately go up an octave,
right?
Totally affect things, but still keep this kind of FM ratio.
Yeah, totally.
I'll quickly, let's just pull an image of that one up. It is in the modular grid. It's in your picture, but it's also here. It's basically a one-in. You get 4 copies out, so you've got a buffered through, and then you get 2 copies of the switched octave. So essentially you're getting 3 outs, 2 of which will follow the octave switching, 2 up or 2 down, and then you get another channel of all that again. So it's great if you want to patch the through output back into the bottom as well, and go, I want my normal one and an octave down and 2 octaves up. It makes, for me, just tuning a few oscillators to unison, which I find quicker. My ear just takes to unison quicker than it does octaves for some reason.
Sure.
And then having the switching, and it's cheap. It's 6 HP. It's super accurate.
Super cheap.
Yeah, everyone should go grab one of those, I think.
It's really so useful, man. And people ask me about it all the time. What is that? It's pretty basic. It's an octave switch, and it's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the U-fold that's in there, I'll pull the modular grid up.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the wave folding in Toner, the Instruo.
I do.
Are you finding, what's the kind of advantage of a double? It's like a double rainbow, a double wave folder.
Well, to be perfectly honest, at first it was because it was the only other 6 HP module that I had left.
Nice.
I've got a lot of big modules. I don't necessarily have a lot of small stuff. But then I thought about it, and I actually use them both in the patch example that I posted, because I thought that might be a question. They both sound very different.
Yeah, they do.
The wave folder on the intro is very clean, very sharp, and then the one on the U-fold is just a bit dirtier. It's a bit more of a classic wave folder. I think they both have their advantages. So in that patch example, both of those sounds are coming out of the intro. I'm wave shaping the sine output, and then I'm also sending the wavefold output through the sequential switch that's on there. I've got just the Doepfer basic guy. And I'm pretty much cycling through different oscillators and different timbres of the exact same sequence. So it's the same sequence going on the whole time, just moving through different instruments and different wave folders to give it a lot of variation.
Again, it's come up a couple of times. Mark's championing this chat. Surprised no one's picked an ornament and crime.
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking about that. And that if I had one, I probably would have put it in there. I don't own one yet. I think it's an amazing piece of kit. I just haven't purchased anything new in a while, and it's on the list.
Yeah, I'm going to get into why I didn't put it in, or any menu-driven thing in mine. So we'll come to that one.
No, I have one, and there's something with the way my brain works where multifunctional versus multi-purpose. Like, I'll use the ornament and crime in one mode for a while, and then I'm very familiar with how to use it. And then if I switch to another mode, I'm completely lost. And then if I spend some time in that mode for a while, I'll start forgetting the mode I knew really well. And that's I think the main reason I haven't connected with it a bunch is it can do amazing stuff and lots of very useful stuff. But because the inputs and outputs don't do the same thing every time, and what they may do is somewhere in menus, I have a hard time just, going to it and knowing what's going to come out of it.
Kind of negates the flexibility of the module itself, doesn't it? If that's
yeah, it does.
A little bit. Like I was having like a brief discussion with someone or people on one of the Facebook groups about kind of the difference between maths is a multi-purpose module because it does this. Every input and output does the same thing all the time, but there's a lot of different applications for each of those inputs and outputs and how you set it up, compared to a multifunctional module like, say, ornament and crime, where you always have some arbitrary in, four out, and what those do is different depending on the mode. And to me, in my brain, those are two totally different kind of things. And my brain just seems to work much better with the multi-purpose, where every input and output is consistent. It's just the applications for those things can be varied versus the inputs and outputs being functionally different depending on what mode you have it set in.
Absolutely.
Noise Jockey in the chat, which is Nathan Moody, asked me to ask you about that, James. You had a long thread on ornament and crime, but obviously you've just told us.
Nice.
Imagine that stuff's a gold mine. Like, for people in the chat that maybe don't speak to anyone else, it might, I think Modular's guilty of looking like a members club sometimes, a bit like, ooh, you're not in this crowd or this clique or niche, or it's very welcoming. But I love these chats. Like, I would love, and I'm not asking you to, but for James or Nathan to just screenshot that whole conversation about ornament and crime. I want to see what you guys think of this thing. I'd very much encourage everyone in the chat to talk to each other. Add any of us, add anyone else. Engaging conversation with people. It's a kind of wonderful and lovely world.
Yeah, and those are the best kind of chats, because it's not that just going on that example, it's not that multifunction is better than multi-purpose or vice versa. It just depends on how each person wants to work and what's the most inspiring to them. Yeah,
well, Mark that brought it up, Mark Zeno in the chat, he's been putting up some Facebook Live stuff. Part played on the Sputnik, part sequenced, part influenced by some of the algorithms on ornament and crime, and it's brilliant. And he's obviously really clicked with it. You guys haven't. There's no right or wrong. It's all subjective.
Oh, absolutely.
All these little conversations are what I find kind of constantly kind of beautiful and engaging with the whole kind of scene.
Yeah,
it's really cool. We'll get back to your system, Corey. So, how are you finding that 2 HP sequencer? You guys talked about Rene. I'm excited to dive into that. There's the little 2 HP sequencer. Just my mouse is wobbling over it right now. If anyone's
it's a small little guy.
Yeah. How are you finding that?
I find it pretty straightforward, very easy to program, and it's got a lot of functions for its size. There's glide. You can choose your number of steps, built-in quantizing, all of that. So because I had to have the Rene in there, because again, that's my favorite probably module of all time, especially for playing live, touching, locking the gates, all of those parameters, it had to be in there. So that was the first thing that went in the case. But I also like polyphony and having a lot of things going on at once. So I thought if I throw another sequencer in there, something small, I can move notes on another oscillator to create some type of a bass for harmony, and then use my Rene as more of like a soloing tool or more of a lead instrument, or just maybe as fixed voltage. There's just a fixed loop of voltage coming out of the 2 HP sequencer for modulating filters or whatever. I just thought having more sequencers than less is better. And I wanted to put a pressure points in there and a brains, but size was an issue here. So 2 HP, it fit the bill, and it's sitting next there to the 3-1, which is a little sequential switch, if you will. I put both gate outputs, the X and Y from the Rene into that. So when I touch the pads, I get gates from both axes.
Oh, right.
Okay, that's cool. I love this idea of a kind of lead sequencer and a backing sequencer.
Yeah.
One to kind of leave going, one to interface with. That's a really cool idea. I like that a lot. What are you doing in terms of kind of effects with this? Are you going out into anything else, or is it just clouds?
Pretty much just clouds. I don't have any outboard effects. I don't own any pedals. I use a lot more effects in the rack if I'm performing live or something, but clouds is kind of a Swiss Army knife of all that. I can get a great delay. I can get a great verb, depending on what firmware I've got loaded in. There's a million options. But back to what James said about, multi-function or multi-purpose, I've owned it for years, and I still get lost. When I switch modes, I forget what the knobs are doing now. And I've got to look it up. I've got the cheat sheet on my phone, and I'm always pulling it up just to make sure I know which one, where's my delay time, where's my feedback, what knob of 4, and where am I? And I love it, but I do find it to be frustrating. But in terms of a small case like this, for 18 HP, I just don't think you'd get a more powerful processor.
Yeah, cool. Move on to mine. If no one's any other questions, check out Red Stripe Down on Instagram or Bandcamp. We'll link all this stuff. I keep saying it. My system, I've been experimenting with this stuff. And Instruo, like I said, a bit of a gushy love letter to Jason Lim. He's kind of really inspired in an EP or an album. This is going to sound super gushy and emotional, and feel free to rip me to shreds for this because I kind of like the banter back and forth. But right around the time of Lorna being born, my baby, I had this kind of lullaby thing in mind, and I almost got into this mindset of what she might want to listen to, and it took me down this path. It's kind of moved on from that. This would probably scare her in terms of harmonic choices, both tonally and musically. I don't think I would. But
it's nearly Halloween. Maybe you should do something like that.
But just trying to find there we go. The Harmonic from Instruo. It's just absolutely stunning. So it's the black module, second from the left at the top there. It's a quad quantizer, one input quantizer that gives you 4 musical related outputs. Like the cubic chord, but without the synth side of it. So you get one input, you can attenuate it, which is really important. I find people using analog sequencers a lot, and they put out 0 to 5 volts, 0 to 8 volts, 0 to 10. Now, if a volt is an octave, that's 10 octaves or 5 octaves or 8 octaves around one single knob turn. That's really hard to tune notes in. So I always used to go from, say, a pressure point into an attenuator into a quantizer, so I could have that knob turn be just 1 octave or 2. So you've got the attenuator right on there. You've got a transpose, which you can engage with the button. Let's find a a picture of it that I can zoom in on. There's, give me a second. There we go. Okay, let's swap this over. I just want to run down the harmonic. It's been such an important thing in my system, and for this kind of musical approach with this example. So right on the top, you've got the input and then the tenuverter. You've got the transpose on that slider, but you can turn the transpose on and off. So it's really nice to transpose and see the little keyboard buttons on the bottom kind of bounce up however many notes up you've transposed or down, and be able to turn that on and off. A bit like your approach, James, of this oscillator is a fifth above or slightly higher or lower. Just to be able to kind of hit a button and go, I'm up in a different register now, and we're in a different area of kind of feel. You punch the scale in on the bottom, which is great if you know what you're doing musically or not, whether you want a specific key or you just want to bash some buttons. I love putting a scale in, a kind of full, say, minor scale, but then taking certain notes out. So as a performance thing, I might only have 2 notes active or 3 notes active, and then slowly add more in. Or if I've just got C and E active, I might add the note D in, but then take C and E out, and then the whole piece starts to shift. You can kind of
yeah, that's a good idea.
Step by step build what you're doing with the quantizer. I'll move from chord tones like C, E, and G, so it's a C major kind of feel. I might add the B in up top, so it sounds like a C major 7, but then I'll take the C out, and then the notes that are left give me an E minor. And I've had this kind of particular approach in terms of music writing and playing before this, and it lets me kind of apply that. You can CV the voice in. You know, if you want to spread the voice out, it'd be very closed, all the notes next to each other, or drop the root down an octave. You can change the inversions, which is the root first, second, and third. Inversion, if anyone's curious, basically just swaps the order of the chord tones around. So if you had C, E, and G, it would then go E, G with C on top. And then you'd do the next inversion and the E would go up top. So it'd be G, C, and E. You get the 4 voice outputs. They've all got an individual slew, which is really cool, just to have a couple.
Oh, yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, that's really cool, man.
Yeah, that's really nice. It gives you a gate when it quantizes to a new note. So I let my pitch decisions almost dictate what's going to happen rhythmically as well, which is quite cool. You can turn the kind of diatonic harmony on and off. Just really, really cool tool. I'll go back to the modular grid image. So what I've tried to do effectively, and this is this whole album EP idea I'm kind of playing around with, it's part generative, part performed. I'm letting the chance from Qubit kind of dictate everything. So all the sequencing is random. I'm just using the discrete output, just stepped sample and hold style random into the instro. So whatever the random's doing, it's always a kind of 4 voice musical thing. I'm using a bank of 4 Mark 1 IntelliGel Dixies. I was kind of lucky to grab those before they come.
Do you have 4 of those?
Yeah.
You do? I've got 1. I've been able to find 1. I love those.
Really early on, I got 1, and then someone was selling 3 in the Dixie controller, and it was more money.
You always manage to get these into your racks, don't you?
I've been quite lucky at finding stuff. Yeah. I found 3 pop up on Muffwiggler. You know, the post happened as I was sort of cruising around the for sale on the Muffwiggler forum at one point. So that's my kind of bank of, they're really basic analog oscillators, but they sound good.
They sound great.
Yeah. So I've got a kind of 4 voice. It's paraphonic. It's not fully polyphonic. I'm taking the chord information from Instro, the harmony, into the 4 Dixies. They're going into the VCA 4P, the bubble sound quad VCA. So I can manipulate amplitude polyphonically. Each oscillator has a VCA next to it. They're then summed in the mix output to the humpback, and then that effectively is that kind of voice. I'm controlling the VCAs with, and this is why I haven't put ornament and criming, because I think this is more tactile and interesting for shape manipulation. I'm using the PDO from WMD as an LFO. It's a fantastic oscillator, having this kind of 4 oscillator phase distortion synthesis. It sounds amazing, but taking the 4 outputs that I can phase shift and then audio rate phase distort to create new LFO shapes across the 4 oscillators, it just works really, really well. So I always get 4 related shapes with a master rate control for them, but they're all kind of swirling in and out of each other, some of them distorting the phase of the other ones. The triple bipolar VCA next to it allows you to do that really, really quickly. It's patched up around the back of the modules. And another thing that I've liked exploring that I kind of really wanted to touch on before getting into module specifics, this idea of decoupling the rhythm from the pitch sequence. I've enjoyed doing that with, again, the Modular Meets Leads 3-module challenge patch thing. I was using rings, and then in the ultra random decide what happens. I then like sending an unrelated clocked sequence in for pitch, because you can control a really basic, say, 4-note pitch sequence that doesn't sound like 4 notes because it's never fallen in time with the rhythmic information, and everything just kind of falls over the top of each other. If the envelopes and things are open, or the VCAs are open for too long, you hear the pitch change right in the middle of the note, and it's a little bit strange, but as long as things are short enough, it works really well. So I'm really enjoying that core of random, kind of self-generated information that's going to be incredibly musical through 4 voices that are all independently controlled, not really in time with anything. You know, as you distort the phase of these LFOs, there's no kind of, oh, this will offset it half a beat, or this will pull it back early or late. It just kind of does its thing. I've then got the E352. Using the Beast chalkboard, I'll take that down an octave from the root note. Because you can invert that, it's not always a root note bass as well. Because the Harmonic will invert, you're not always just copying the first voice down an octave. So that gets quite interesting. I'm using that in stereo into the pan mix in the bottom right, the Happy Nerding module. Just taking 2 inputs, pad panning them left and right, independent wave morphing, so I've got a more complex kind of bass tone with a 4-voice chord tone sat on top. The pan mix from Happy Nerding, I don't think many people know about this one. Really good stereo mixer.
It's the first I've ever seen of it.
Yeah, same here.
Ben, when Ben showed me this, it's amazing, and built like a tank as well.
Really? Huh. No shit.
Yeah, let me pull.
It's amazing. You've got those kind of dual pot things, and it's really, really cool.
Yeah, let's pull the image of that one up. That's one that needs.
What's the HP on that, Ben?
Let's go back. I'm on their website. Let's have a look. 16 HP.
Nice. Ooh, man, my eyes are getting bad. I was like, it's 18.
Dual pot, though. You know.
Yeah. So it uses those dual concentric pots, a bit like what you find on like an active bass guitar, where the bottom bit's bass and the top bit's treble. Or
yeah, right. That's a cool way of doing that and saving space.
Yeah.
So you've got volume and pan per channel, but you've only got 1 CV per channel, but you can switch that from panning or volume.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Which you don't always need both. You can't see the
exactly.
So that's really cool. But the other nice trick, the bottom 2 channels, channel 3 and channel 6, are actually stereo jacks. So if you take like a headphone splitter or one of those typical Y cables, you can get a stereo channel 3 and a stereo channel 6. So really it's 8 channels.
Oh, that's cool.
It's really flexible, isn't it? They've really thought about this.
They've absolutely rinsed it.
It's not one thing. It can be different things.
Yeah, the way I'm making use of that I found really useful is with a kind of stereo effects over the output. So the ZDSP's running in stereo, and it's a jumper around the back that decides whether they're stereo or not. So it's really easy to change. Channel 6 is always my kind of stereo effect over the output. The other bit, a bit like you, Corey, thinking I've only got a bit of space left, what can I put in? I threw a radio music in next to the pan mix.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just thinking, a bit like what James said, I could be in a certain key and just throw lots of kind of field recording stuff that's been manipulated into a certain note or key, or even just noise. I like having noise to play with. Vinyl crackle, amp hum, anything that's not, well, amp hum's usually fairly pitched. Anything that's not too pitched, just something that is noise. Vinyl crackle usually. I'm a real sucker for kind of hip hop produced where the noise is pumping around the drums.
Oh yeah.
I like that kind of suck and swell of not dense white noise, more kind of crackle or broken downsampled noise.
Yeah, like a texture that's in there.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned getting in between sections, patching live. You've got a couple different sections. Tools like that are great for that. To bring in some noise, some type of a sample, especially the radio music's got a nice lo-fi quality depending what sample you're on. That through some effects or stretching that, if you've got a sampler or a morphogene or something, that's a great way to get in between sections, especially if they're pitched differently. For moving from key to key, you can blend it. Just think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah.
People are on, well, someone in the comments when they were on about transitioning and stuff, like, there's your answer.
Yeah. Find something that works. You know, if it's a drone or samples, something, there's definitely a way to piece together pieces of music, and it doesn't have to necessarily be related.
Yeah. The other couple of tricks, the patch example I've put up doesn't have the kind of bells and whistles of this. It was some slightly different modules, but I'm in the mid of a case change to try and nail this album. So again, us doing this show is right at the right time of me trying to get this album done with this small system. Couple of things I did do which have proved instantly interesting. Taking all 4 voices into the humpback filter, which is just to the left of the ZDSP. Really great SEM style filter. It's got, you can't see it there because the cable spaghetti is so intense, but the 4 outputs at the bottom there, low pass, high pass, band pass, notch, basic filter stuff, are patched into a 2 HP switch. And then with the knob or CV, I can change through those 4 different filter responses. My trick for creating a send, because the pan mix doesn't have a send, it does have a headphone out, which is useful, and LED meters. I've put two HP mix modules, one on each side of the ZDSP, so I've got a mixer per side. And then
HPs are just so great, aren't they? They're just, when you want one thing to do one thing great, that's it.
Yeah. Now I wanted to be at a send. I wanted to put the WMD performance mixer in, but it was too big to do. It's fantastic, and it's amazing in the big case, but it's amazing if you're rinsing all those VCAs as well, because that 20 odd VCAs in traffic. But having a mixer per side means I've got a split of every single thing: the 4 voices, the radio music, both sides of the E352, and I think I've copied in the actual white noise out from Chance. So there's no noise directly to the pan mix. I can just influence noise in the reverb chain, which is a nice textural thing I like to do. I used to do that in Ableton Live quite a lot. If you put the Vinyl Crackle emulator, or you grab like the free isotope vinyl plugin, just run that at the start of an effect send, and then as soon as a sound hits it that's clean, this crackle just starts to emerge in the back of your reverb. It's really cool. It's a good way of pushing it into the distance. So each side, I've only got one of these little mixers at the minute, so I'm having to use something else, but I'll have to get another one. I can manipulate the stereo image by that kind of reverb. I could put a lot of the E352 in one side, a lot of the chord tone in the other, a bit of noise in one and not in the other. You could completely go independent, so it's like a dual mono thing on the ZDSP. Voltage blocks in there. Like James was saying, I've been playing around with a voltage block or a pressure point. Voltage blocks, amazing for getting things animated really quickly. A little bit trickier if you very specifically just want to adjust the third output on step 2, because you've got to press it and it holds, and you kind of lose a little bit of what's going on. Other things in there, the WMD multi-mode envelope. My favorite envelope other than the knobs being backwards, the fastest the fastest times are to the right rather than the left. I remember Bill at WMD saying, but you know, the higher the frequency of something, like an oscillator or a filter, the further to the right. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's not how envelopes have ever been.
Yeah.
You do get used to it very quickly. It's just slightly counterintuitive to start with.
That's how that ModCan system we were talking about earlier, that 5U system, that's how those envelopes are as well. And it throws me off every time.
It's like speed rather than time.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a crazy old EMS, AKA synths and stuff. They made a polysynth, and apparently all the knobs on that are backwards. Everything. All the values are at that way is 0. So it's like,
okay. That's awesome. So yeah, that's effectively my system. I'm interested in this kind of part performed, part generative. I'm not interested in writing a sequence for this specifically. My mood might change next week, but I love random for lots of different things. Letting random. We've talked about random as like having someone else playing in the band, like having a friend that kind of does what you tell them to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
like they're drunk. You tell them to play a riff and they don't quite get it. But running it through quantizers and things, it's like, play me, and you've got the attenuator on chance. You can say, play me a kind of 1 octave thing that's vaguely minor or pentatonic sounding, and it's going to do it through a quantizer.
A jazz friend in the corner.
A jazz friend.
Not my jazz friend.
Several jazz friends.
Yeah.
But what you were saying, Ben, about using random in musical applications, I mean, you're spot on. And people ask me all the time about random. Why would I need that? I don't want my music to be randomized. And it's, well, it depends on how you use it, but it really can add a lot of organic and human feel to your patches. Drum sounds, I use it for hi-hats all the time to get a little bit of variation and just anything. It's a really useful tool that I think is overlooked quite a bit.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Those kind of people, I reckon, Corey, that say those kind of things, if you sort of said to them, oh, right, so are you from a conventional kind of keyboard playing background or whatever, but do you like Aftertouch?
Right. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah, I love Aftertouch. Well, you're going to love random.
Absolutely. How do you emulate that in the modular world? You need random. Yeah.
You just said, so it's not the whole thing that it's the whole paradigm is that you've got to remember that random isn't one thing.
Right.
You want it to be, and it can be from this amount to that amount, so.
Yeah, with me mentioning this kind of pushing and pulling and sucking around noise, obviously with a kind of hip-hop production, the noise is in the samples and it's ducking against the drums, and that's what you get. Mark asked, again, cheers Mark for absolutely rinsing it in the chat. There's been lots of good stuff coming up, talking to others and asking us questions. With this particular system, I was thinking about it then, just as you were talking, I was thinking, how would I actually do it? It's not something I'd thought about in this system, but if my noise was from the radio music and I'm using the phase displacement oscillator as an LFO into the VCA 4P to make all my notes swell in and out, so it's never a block chord, they're all individually swelling up and down, I would take a split with a stackable, because I have no room for mults, of one of those voices, say the root note, and invert it in the triple bipolar VCA, send the inverted version into the pan mixer CV, so that as the voice swells up, the noise is reduced, and as the oscillator sound comes down, the noise is brought back up again, creating a kind of fake side chain effect. The way I do it in my bigger system around the kick is just to split my gate that I'm triggering a kick drum with. I'll split that into an envelope, invert the envelope, because I find triggering an envelope rather than using an envelope follower is more flexible. If I've got a really long kick drum, that voltage is going to stay down way too long. So I
Right.
split the gate into an envelope. I can completely shape the response. It's like having the attack and release of a compressor. Invert that, send that into a VCA. Kick goes up, sound comes down, kick comes down, sound goes up. And the envelope allows me to play with that relationship. There are
You can also start triggering those at different rates and stuff.
Yeah, that gets really cool. If you've got some, like what you were doing, Corey, with sequential switches, having, rhythms that are merged, but then one just goes off. Or you add some extra in, I like when you said you touch the pads and it merges the X and the Y. That's a nice little trick as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just as we kind of wrap up, anyone watching live, throw any questions in last minute. I will watch the chat for another couple of minutes before we finish.
Unfortunately, I got a bounce earlier than I thought. Sorry,
cool.
guys.
No, well, we're just going to wrap up anyway. I'll leave it for a minute just for questions. But thank you so much, James. Check out jimdrones.bandcamp for James's release. Very good. And we'll put links to it. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
Thanks,
Yeah,
James. Catch you later.
Good to see you, James.
Likewise.
James.
People saying that they're sad they missed James's show last night. That's a shame. So am I, but we're at the wrong side of the ocean for that. Yeah, anything else anyone wants to touch on just while we give the chat 30 seconds or so?
Well, you and I, Ben, have got a release on DIN Records. We've got a new release coming out there. I don't know how much we talk about it really, but
I think, well, we're certainly not allowed to share anything, obviously, but I think I don't know if we're supposed to keep quiet. Let's just say that.
Yeah, we're doing stuff.
We're doing stuff.
It's coming out soon.
Yeah. I'm working on an EP with this stuff. I keep getting asked about music. My time's completely occupied with video demos. And to be honest, I'm kind of happy with that. I'm not thinking, oh God, I've got to do a demo again. I can't work on this. I find that the little patches and riffs and effects very much satisfy a lot of kind of musical creativity for me. I really enjoy doing the demos and making little riffs. It's treating them as little mini improvised songs. But
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think that's what a lot of people kind of get hung up on when they get these kind of creative blind spots, for want of a better word, is the fact that they think, oh, well, all I do is these little bits, and I don't do this, and I haven't created a full album. It's like, this is all part of your armory, if you like.
Your repertoire, for sure.
This is just all the parts that make you what you're going to do later. It's like, don't see this as a lesser thing that you're doing. It's all part of the scheme.
And in that kind of, modern, since DVDs had extras with the behind the scenes and making of the audio for Star Wars or whatever on the bonus disc, if you record everything you're doing, all these little patches, and then that informs an EP later down the line, look at this trail of stuff you've effectively got for your potential audience, all this behind the scenes stuff. And it's learning as well. Modular has taken me on such a journey musically that I definitely wouldn't be doing with this system what I want to, I wouldn't do that in a DAW. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm not getting into an argument as to modular sonically is better. But I wouldn't approach or do the same things at all.
It's all workflow.
Yeah.
It's all about how you like to work, what works for you. And I think that's the advantage of doing what you do, Ben. You get a really unique experience in getting to try almost everything and learning it in and out. And then you can decide whether or not that works for you, if that is going to be part of your workflow or not. And it's satisfying. It's just as helpful to learn that that's not something you're going to do as it is to learn something if that is something you're going to do. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah, and it changes the way I use a DAW as well. I still love programs like Serum by X for Records. I think it's deep for me. And like you, Matthew, I don't like the word best because it's subjective. But it's kind of the best soft synth for me. I absolutely love Serum. Sonically, the interface, the way I can create waves, absolutely killer. But I think I write and make better music on anything because of spending so much time on this and properly learning synthesis. It's amazing for that. Someone's asked, is it true that Martin Gore's got the largest Euro rack system on the planet? Probably.
Probably, yeah.
I think so. Yeah, so with this album, this is the last thing I kind of touch on, a little bit of a plug. My thinking is that if you're on my Patreon page, you get it for free, just for being there for a few dollars each month, and you'll get all the, I'm going to give all the stems away as well. I want to give away the Logic project. So anyone that's really curious, because questions come up all the time, you know, how did you make that bass sound? What are the effects? Why is there this stereo thing going on? Everyone on Patreon, I'm going to give the Logic project away to, which will have all the audio in, and the tracks, and the album, and all the videos. I'm doing some kind of making of stuff. Anyone that doesn't want to be on Patreon because they think it's lame, it's becoming a really important bit of income for me. It's allowing me to leave other work to spend more time doing this, and all the public stuff benefits as well.
I don't think people should belittle it at all. It's like, if people like something and they like seeing your videos or anyone else's videos, it's like, would you rather this person not exist and have to go off YouTube? It's like, no, you wouldn't. So for that tiny amount of money,
yeah, it's enabling me to keep doing stuff free for everyone. But then when this EP and album comes out, you guys, you know, you'll just get everything. All the I'm not going to give everything else away for free either. You know, you can either go buy the album for $5 on Bandcamp, whatever I decide to do, or you can chuck $5 in Patreon and get all the audio, all the stems, videos showing you how I did it, and everything else way earlier than anyone else. So it's probably the first time I've plugged Patreon on here. I need to be more active. It is becoming a really important bit of my income. And I'd love to leave work and just sit here and talk to you guys and not leave the house. I'd love to be a modular hermit. If anyone wants to make that happen. I like not socialising, and only socialising occasionally when it's talking to Matthew or Greg about modules. Cool. That's my kind of plug out of the way. Everything will be in the description. Cheers for everyone that watched live. For anyone that didn't watch live and you're wondering why we keep saying this through the video, follow us on Facebook. We film these separately to them going on YouTube. You can join in. The chat window's been really good. Let's give them a little steal the Nick Bat trick from Sonic State. Show the chat room off. Thanks to everyone that came on, and yeah, I'll speak to you guys soon.
See you later, guys. Yeah.
Later, guys.
See you, guys.